Hello my beautiful watchers, and welcome to the first episode of A Dom of Ice and Fire, the show where I, your host the Dom, shall take a look at the notable differences between the hit HBO show Game of Thrones and the books it was based on. Winter has finally come for Lost in Adaptation. A Game of Thrones is the first book in a series known as A Song of Ice and Fire and was written by American author George R.R. Martin and first published in 1996. This book and all its subsequent sequels became insanely popular, so producers D.B. Weiss and David Benioff pitched the idea of a TV series adaptation to HBO, and it was picked up in 2007. Supposedly, during their first meeting, Martin would only agree to let them adapt his work if they were able to successfully guess who Jon Snow's mother was. I cannot attest to the truth of this, but holy shit, if it is, that is awesome! Before we go any further, I just need to go over a few things. First and foremost, spoiler warning! I'm reviewing the first book and the first season, but some stuff that they change here has far-reaching consequences for later series, so I can't guarantee I won't suddenly mention something from a much later book or episode without any warning. If you're not up to date, this is not safe for you. I have too much to talk about to do it per season, so I'm going to be doing it per episode. I don't know for sure at this point, but I very much doubt every episode I make is going to be the same length, especially this first one. I also want to mention that if there's a change that affects multiple episodes, I might mention it when I consider it most relevant as opposed to the first time it shows up. I'm afraid I also have a quick confession to make. I am, to my shame, one of those fake geek bandwagon jumping motherfuckers who didn't read the books until after the TV show was popular. And that was partly by design. Before it was adapted, I just hadn't come across it. I usually lean more towards science fiction, and no one recommended these books to me. Then, after it started, I intentionally waited until after season 5 had concluded before I started reading them. I was really enjoying the show, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this because I'm usually so super chill about it, but I kind of have a thing about adaptations and their accuracy, and I just knew that as soon as I started reading the books, it was going to take a lot of the fun out of the show for me, so even though I suspected I was going to love them, I wanted to put off reading the books for as long as possible. So what does this mean for A Dom of Ice and Fire? Well, hopefully not too much. You have my solemn oath that I will not allow my love for the show to hinder my judgment of it if I think they fucked up adapting something. You just probably won't hear the same level of resentment in my voice compared to, say, when I covered the Harry Potter books. Right, let's get the reviews of them as individual entities out of the way real quick, then we can jump right into the adaptation. Each book in this series is written in a very specific format. There's a select number of point-of-view characters that the book cycles through in each chapter, telling the story from their perspective. There's also usually a prologue and sometimes an epilogue that's told from the perspective of an additional person who's only a POV character for that one chapter, usually because they end up dead by the end of it. Interestingly, the chapters are not evenly divided between the POV characters and don't follow any sort of order in their appearance. A character may have every other chapter for a while, then disappear for the rest of the book without warning. It was basically chosen by who was needed to advance the plot and not anything else. In A Game of Thrones, the POV characters are, in order of the amount of chapters they had, Eddard Stark, who had 15, Catelyn Stark, who had 11, Daenerys Targaryen with 10, Tyrion Lannister and Jon Snow, who both had 9, Bran Stark with 7, Sansa Stark with 6, and Arya Stark with 5. As the books in the series got longer, so did the amount of point-of-view characters in each one. As for my personal opinion on this book, I'm afraid it's fairly typical of what everyone else seems to be saying about it. It's amazing at world building, it's very good at suspense and misdirection, it's got very real feeling characters, and it's satisfyingly different to a lot of other stories out there, partly because of its pull-no-punches attitude towards portraying bleakness. However, that last point is also one of its major weaknesses, because yeah, it is fucking bleak at times. It's kind of exhausting to read as you often have to fight certain impulses it drives you towards.
Dom, you've got work to do. Get up.
What's the point? What's the point in anything?
On top of that, even the thinnest of these books is thick enough to use as a bludgeon in close quarters combat, so yeah, they're not for the faint of heart. Right, let's talk about the HBO show. I would be first to admit that it is far from perfect, but God help me, I fucking love this show. The cast, the costumes, the cliffhangers, the humor, the battles, the love, the hate, the motherfucking dragons! It's all just so good! I also kind of have an obsession with swords, so this show is virtually porn for me, even when everyone's got their clothes on. I almost wish I didn't like it so much so I'd have something interesting to say here, but yeah, Game of Thrones, yo. Fuck it, let's talk adaptation. For the most part, the prologue where the two seasoned rangers take the bossy lordling beyond the wall to track some wildling raiders and fall afoul of the others is book accurate, as was the execution scene where the survivor is beheaded for attempting to flee south. The Stark children come across the direwolf pups and Jon convincing his father to let his children adopt them, taking the albino outcast for his own. It's also amusingly book loyal that Theon Greyjoy didn't immediately recognise a direwolf despite having grown up as a ward of the house that uses it as its sigil. Arya's tomboyish nature inclining her to cheese it out of the sewing session is relocated in the timeline slightly, but otherwise pretty book accurate. Sansa's contrasting natural affinity for being ladylike is also good. Catelyn finding her husband Ned in the Godswood cleaning his greatsword Ice and breaking the news to him that Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King and the man who had helped raise him, had died of a sudden illness, along with the news that his old friend King Robert Baratheon was making the long journey from the capital city of King's Landing to Winterfell to see him. Magister Illyrio pouring sweet honeyed words in Viserys Targaryen's ear about the people of Westeros hoping for his return. The mention of Dothraki braids and their significance in regards to their prowess as a warrior. Viserys' intention to trade his little sister to a Dothraki carl called Drogo in exchange for him helping him reclaim his throne. Viserys bad touching his sister, par the course for the Targaryens. He didn't strip her in the book, but she did have a hot bath slightly later, so the gratuitous fan service is at least technically book loyal. Jon Snow talking with his uncle Benjen when he came to visit from the Wall, where he first states his desire to join the Night's Watch. Tyrion and Jon's conversation outside the feast, where Tyrion gives him some life advice about not letting people get under his skin. The extremely violent nature of Dothraki weddings and their multiple deaths. Daenerys being given 3 ancient dragon eggs as a wedding gift. Ser Jorah, the exiled knight, coming into the Targaryen service. The rather nice horse that Drogo gave Daenerys as a wedding gift. The letter Cat receives from her sister Lysa saying she suspects the Lannisters of killing her husband Jon Arryn, and the way it affected Eddard's decision to become the Hand of the King to try to protect his friend. And Bran's climbing obsession leading to him getting an eyeful of blonde twincest action, and the resulting Jaime patented express ticket to ground level. A change that makes itself apparent right from the start is everyone's habit of referring to the humanoid monsters from the north as White Walkers. While that name was occasionally used in the books, mostly by wildlings, they were much more commonly referred to as the Others. My personal pet theory for this change, aside from White Walkers sounding so much cooler, is that the word Others was already associated with the TV show Lost, which had only concluded a year before with a notoriously disappointing final episode. The show definitely had a different take on the Others in the book, though as you don't really see them clearly in this episode, I'll have to come back to this later. As I said before, the prologue is good overall, but they did play around with it a little bit. There's no mention of the wildling bodies being arranged into any sort of pattern or glyph, and there's no mad chase through the trees after they're attacked. They also did young Rhaemar Royce somewhat of a disservice by having him killed in a surprise attack. In the book, despite his youth and pompous nature, he went down like a fucking badass, dueling an other with all his strength until his sword shattered. The two veterans, despite their superior dislike of Royce, either hid in a tree like a squirrel until the others had moved on, or ran like fuck. More amusingly, they seem to have switched which of the two rangers got killed out in the woods and which was executed later. The prologue ends as Will, the cameo point of view character for the chapter, is strangled by the newly reanimated corpse of Rhaemar Royce, and it's Garrett who flees south right past the wall and gets caught in the north. The pre-execution scene in Winterfell that introduced the Starks is TV show only, as chapter 1 of the book started at the execution grounds and Garrett's decapitation, told from Bran's perspective. The first thing a book reader will have noticed at this point is how hit and miss the Stark children are appearance-wise. In the book, most of them don't have classic Stark features because they inherited their mother's Tully genetics, most prominently in their dark red hair and deep blue eyes. The only two that look more like Eddard were Arya and, to Catelyn's annoyance, Jon. Robb, Bran and Rickon should have looked more like Sansa, but one can only assume they wanted to make them appear more like a family and chose actors that would be considered more northern in their features. This change also serves to accentuate how unusually un-Stark-like Sansa is at the beginning, a very large staple in her multi-series character arc. While Tyrion did sleep with whores in the book, he had the good manners not to do it before introducing himself to the Starks. Season 1 played up his party boy side a bit. Peter Dinklage is somewhat more handsome than his Tyrion Lannister book counterpart. The original Tyrion had a grotesquely overlarge forehead, and somewhat off-puttingly, his eyes didn't match as one was green and the other black. He's also apparently acrobatic as fuck in the book, despite his awkward waddling walk. In his first meeting with Jon in the courtyard, he's chilling out on a roof, roof and double backflips to the ground, landing on his hands and cartwheeling to his destination. Wrong eye colour is actually another recurring theme in these adaptations. The Targaryens in particular were famous for having violet eyes, but considering how long this show had the potential to go on for, I'm inclined to be more forgiving of their decision not to force contact lenses on their poor actors. Another early deviation from the books is the starting age of all the younger characters. Everyone is bumped up a few years. Rickon goes from being 3 to being 6, Bran from 7 to 10, Arya from 9 to 11, Sansa from 11 to 13, and Jon and Robb from 14 to 17. The Lannister children got the same treatment, as did Daenerys Targaryen, who went all the way up from being 13 to 17. In her case, yeah, I can see why they did that. As for everyone else, well, my guess is that it was a case of hoping that having a slightly older cast would result in better acting. Aside from the slightly less icky sex scenes, the only real knock-on effect of this is that it means that Robert has been on the Iron Throne for a little longer, so it's largely harmless. Despite how iconic it's become in the marketing of the show, they didn't actually get the sigil for House Stark right at all. It's described quite clearly as being a running direwolf on a field of white, as opposed to a big snarling head. Sometimes they got the background right, but other times it's got this beige and green thing going on. I guess maybe they wanted to avoid white because historically that's the flag of surrender, I don't know. You'll find that a recurring theme in these adaptations is that Dany's lovers, or potential lovers, are made to be more conventionally handsome than described originally, and, well, for want of a more intelligent sounding description, more cool looking. Khal Drogo, for example, him being huge, intimidating and ferocious, yet still somehow light on his feet, they nailed, but they quietly left out things about his appearance that might have been a little harder for a modern audience to take seriously. For one thing, he's not described as having a beard as such, more a giant drooping mustache that he bound with little gold and copper rings, and he wore a shit ton of little bells worked into his hair. I don't know about you, but yeah, I don't think I would have seen him as quite as much of a badass if he jingled every time he moved. Jorah Mormont is just generally more of a dilf in the show. He was barrel-chested and hairy everywhere on his body except his head in the book. A very minor change is the Kingsguard seems to have been given a uniform armor to go along with their white cloaks. In the book, they wore whatever the hell they wanted, so Jaime was kicking about in his shiny gilded armor right from book 1. Jon is a bit tricky because I don't know if anyone else is going to give a shit about the changes I noticed in regards to him, because while they changed the dynamic of his time in Winterfell somewhat, it really doesn't have much of a lasting effect on his story once he's at the wall. The first is the way that Ghost came into his care. In the book and the show, he's the only one who hears him moving about as they're about to leave and goes back to get him. The difference is, in the show, Theon mockingly says to Jon, "That one's yours," likening him to the runt of the litter, whereas in the book it's Jon who says, "This one's mine," a defiant ownership of the fact that he is indeed an outcast but has the potential to be just as strong as the rest of the pack. The second change is that Jon isn't excluded from the feast entirely in the book. He's just not seated at the head table with the king's family. He actually quite likes this, as a result, he was allowed to bring Ghost with him, he could drink as much as he liked, and he didn't have to watch his words or act dignified. The book even goes as far as to say that this was one of the times that Jon was glad he was a bastard. These two changes served to make him appear even more miserable at Winterfell than he was in the book. Don't get me wrong, his bastard status was the bane of his existence there too, but the show just goes out of its way to make everything just slightly worse for him. King Robert's a bit short for the role. I mean, I'm just saying, the dude was fucking tall in the books. Fuck you, Catelyn Stark! I'm sorry, you might have to get used to me saying that because, yeah, I have issues with this character. Some are legitimate criticisms and some are just personal hang-ups, but either way, just fuck you, Catelyn Stark. Right now, if you're nodding your head and have a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about, yeah, she's even worse in the books. The level that this lady takes her belief that she knows what's best for everyone is just overwhelming sometimes when you're perceiving the world from her perspective. In regards to actual changes in the show, a significant one in episode 1 is the scene where Ned is having to make his big decision about whether or not to become the Hand of the King. In the show, Catelyn is primarily concerned for her husband's safety and happiness and tries to talk him out of it, while Maester Luwin makes the case for accepting. In the book, Catelyn immediately tries to make the decision for Ned, and she and Maester Luwin team up to attempt to strong-arm him into it. As neither Jaime nor Cersei are POV characters in a Game of Thrones, any scenes of just them are added in or transplanted from a different setting. Originally, the cheeky chat they had at Jon's funeral was something Bran overheard in the tower before they started getting down to the twincest. Weirdly enough, Jaime actually saved Bran's life before he tried to kill him in the book. When Bran was seen, he panicked, lost his grip and fell, but Jaime managed to leap forward and grab him. His delivery of the line, "the things I do for love," was also laced with disgust in the book, implying that he felt he was being forced to do it by Cersei's insistence. And this is almost certainly bollocks for several reasons, but I'll have to come back to that as the series progresses. There are Westeros is the show's first entirely original creation. There's a passing mention of a red-headed whore in Winterfell, but that is it. Okay, so here's my least favourite change, not just in episode 1, but all of season 1. There's lots to talk about in regards to it, but basically what it comes down to is the difference between no and no. Sorry, let me try that again with a visual component. It's the difference between no and no. I am of course referring to the infamous scene where Khal Drogo rapes Daenerys on their wedding night. For many people, this understandably put a bit of a downer on their subsequent romance. No matter how their relationship developed after that, it was still a story of a woman falling in love with her rapist. In the book, Khal Drogo does not rape Daenerys. In the show, Drogo mutters the word no over and over again while he stalks around her and starts undressing her in preparation, and Dany seems to realise in a moment of despair exactly what it says about her husband if the only word he's heard enough in her language to learn was no. No! In the book he says the same word, but it's in the form of a question. He says it specifically so that he could offer Daenerys an out from sex on their wedding night if she didn't want to. That was kind of Drogo's shtick in the book. He was fearsome and unstoppable with the whole world, but tender and gentle with Daenerys, and just Daenerys. The sex between them was entirely consensual. Before you think I'm singing Drogo's praises too much, well, he was still a Dothraki warlord. He did rape people, just not her. And of course, there's some doubt as to how much consent someone who's barely into her teens and who's been effectively sold as property can give, but for what it's worth, she decided that she was down for some hanky-panky on their wedding night, and Book Drogo wasn't planning to force the issue. Apparently Martin shares my dislike of this, as this is supposedly one of the early changes that he really tried to argue against. According to him, this scene had been filmed once already with the original actress for Dany, and was much closer to the original scene in the book, but when they reshot it with Emilia Clarke, somehow it all got a bit more assaulty. I don't believe that this was a change without a purpose. If you think about it, it means that the first thing that Daenerys conquered was her marriage. Taking control of their love life was her first step towards taking control of, well, entire cities and countries eventually. You could make the case that making her more of a victim at first actually makes her a stronger character in the long run, as she had more to overcome. Whether you feel this justifies that change or not, and or if it kind of puts an inescapable douchebag mark on Drogo, is entirely up to you. Royce's backstory was skipped over as it was part of Will's internal thoughts in the book, but considering his lifespan in both versions of the story, I doubt anyone will shed tears because they didn't bother working it into dialogue. There's passing references to stuff that becomes more important later, early on in this book, like the religion based around the Lord of Light and the Children of the Forest, though of course no one considers the possibility that they might be real. The absence of Jane Poole being established as anything other than a background character should have set off alarm bells for the book readers in regards to much later events in the timeline. After Ned finally gave in and agreed to become the Hand, there was a brief but intense argument between him and Cat over the fate of Jon Snow. Eddard said he couldn't bring a bastard to King's Landing because it would insult all these sticks up their arses noble houses, but Catelyn refused to allow him to stay at Winterfell after Eddard left. Maester Luwin then mentioned that Jon had shown an interest in joining the Watch, which everyone eventually agreed was the best possible solution, even though Ned hated that he was going to have to go to the Wall so young. Basically, Jon may have been destined for the Night's Watch whether he wanted to go or not, as Cat's hatred of him put Ned in a no-win scenario. Fuck you, Catelyn Stark. Jon and Arya have a cute heart-to-heart in Winterfell about the joys of being a woman or a bastard in Westeros while they watched Robb and Joffrey spar in the courtyard. Because the books can, through a POV character remembering something, easily revisit past events, you get very detailed descriptions of things like the Battle of the Trident where the Targaryens were defeated, and the one and only time that Catelyn had ever asked Ned who Jon's mother was. Apparently this was the only time in their marriage that he had ever scared the shit out of her, becoming mad intense and saying that the child was his blood, and that was all she needed to know. Cat's theory was that it might have been a woman called Ashara Dane, sister to Arthur Dane, the mad-skilled Kingsguard who Ned killed at the Tower of Joy. Word on the street was that she was very grateful to him for returning their family's ancestral sword and restoring the family honour, so she may have gotten to know Ned's ancestral sword too. The Dom's final thoughts. As I tried to explain before, Jon and Daenerys are both characters who start the story at their absolute lowest moment and slowly rise to greatness throughout the books. This show made a conscious effort with both of them to make that low starting point even lower, playing up Jon's outcast nature in Winterfell and making Dany a rape victim of her new husband. The former is harmless enough and serves to increase Jon's achievements, as I assume they hoped, but the latter... I suspect the increase in violence towards women in the show, or at least the main character women, is a rabbit hole subject I am not qualified to deal with. All I can really say is, yeah, there was less of it in the book. I still fucking love this show, but even with things you love, it's important to acknowledge when you think they've made a mistake in the direction they took it. That awkwardness aside, this is a crazy strong start for the show adaptation-wise. All the key points of the chapters were met, and for the most part, all the characters acted just like their book originals. The most important thing they were successful in recreating was, just like in the book, the prologue and the subsequent setup of the story draws you in like the gravity well of a neutron star. This first episode was some A-class book-to-screen adapting. And I hope you enjoyed it, because it doesn't last forever. Hey beautiful watchers, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that there's a variety of rewards you can earn by becoming a Patreon, including early access to all videos, getting to be a part of the survey about how many people saw the film and read the book, or playing Minecraft with me on my 24-hour server. Higher level contributors can also join the Dom's Skype chat room, and best of all, choose future episodes of Lost in Adaptation. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that, a mischievous orangutan recently made off with my wallet and I'm yet to track the scoundrel down and retrieve it. Fear not, if you would instead be willing to like, share, subscribe, or a combination of all three, that goes a long way towards helping my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. Have a most pleasant day, and I will see you soon.